I met Derek when I was 23, fresh out of college, working my first real job at a marketing firm. He was 29, handsome, ambitious, already climbing the corporate ladder. We married 2 years later, in a small ceremony surrounded by friends and family. I thought I'd found my person, my partner, my future. 20 years later, I sat across from him in a lawyer's office, watching him lie to a judge about assets he'd hidden, money he'd stolen, promises he'd broken. And I smiled. Because while he thought he was cleaning me out, I'd already moved everything he couldn't touch. Every dollar I'd earned, every penny I'd saved, was somewhere he'd never find it. Let me rewind. My name is Claire. I'm 45, a financial analyst, and for 20 years, I was married to a man named Derek. In the beginning, we were happy. Or at least I thought we were. He was charming, successful, the kind of man everyone admired. We bought a house, had 2 kids, built a life that looked perfect from the outside. But perfection is often a facade. Derek's charm masked a controlling nature that emerged slowly, insidiously, over the years. He managed our finances. "You're so busy with the kids, let me handle it." He made the big decisions. "Trust me, I know what's best for us." He isolated me from our joint accounts, our investments, our future. By the time I realized what was happening, I had no idea how much money we had, where it was, or how to access it. The wake-up call came 5 years ago. I'd been offered a promotion at work, a senior position with a significant raise. Derek's response: "Do you really need to work that much? The kids need you at home." I took the promotion anyway. And for the first time, I started paying attention. I opened my own bank account, a small one, just for my paycheck. I started tracking our joint accounts, noticing irregularities. Money that didn't add up. Transfers I didn't authorize. A pattern of small withdrawals that, over time, added up to something significant. I confronted Derek. He laughed. "You're paranoid. It's called managing our finances. You should thank me." I didn't thank him. I hired a forensic accountant. What she found made my blood run cold. Derek had been siphoning money from our joint accounts for years, investing in his own name, hiding assets in accounts I didn't know existed, preparing for a future that didn't include me. He'd been planning this for a long time. I filed for divorce the next week. The divorce was brutal. Derek fought everything: custody, assets, even the house we bought together. His lawyers were aggressive, well-paid, and utterly without scruple. They accused me of everything: wasting marital assets, being an unfit mother, even having an affair I didn't. It was a campaign of character assassination designed to make me cave, to settle for less than I deserved. But I had something they didn't expect: information. The forensic accountant had given me a detailed picture of Derek's hidden assets. The accounts in his name only. The investments in his brother's business. The offshore account he thought I didn't know about. I kept that information close, waiting for the right moment to use it. The moment came during a deposition. Derek's lawyer, a smug man named Harrison, asked me about our retirement accounts. "Mrs. Vance, can you confirm that you and your husband had a joint 401k valued at approximately $800,000? "Yes." "And can you confirm that you recently withdrew the entire balance?" I smiled. "No, I can't confirm that." Harrison frowned. "The bank records show a withdrawal of $780,000 from the joint 401k on March 15th. "That's correct. There was a withdrawal. But it wasn't from our joint account. It was from an account in my name only." Derek's face went pale. "That's not possible. The 401k was in both our names." "It was. Until I moved it." The room went silent. Derek's lawyer stared at me. Derek looked like he might be sick. "You see," I continued, "when I started noticing irregularities in our finances, I took steps to protect myself. I consulted with a financial advisor who specialized in divorce planning. We moved my portion of the 401k, the portion I'd earned over 20 years, into a separate account. An account in my name only, an account that, by law, you can't touch." Derek's lawyer sputtered. That's illegal. You can't just move marital assets during a divorce. It's not illegal if it's done before the divorce is filed.
And it was.
The transfer happened 3 weeks before I served him with papers. Perfectly legal. Perfectly timed. Derek stood up, his chair scraping against the floor. You bitch. You planned this. I planned to protect what was mine. What I earned. What you've been stealing from for years. The deposition ended shortly after. Derek stormed out, his lawyer trailing behind, already planning his next move. I sat in the conference room, my heart pounding, feeling something I hadn't felt in years. Empowered. The battle wasn't over. Derek's lawyers immediately filed a motion to freeze the account, arguing that the transfer was fraudulent and should be reversed. But I had documentation, timestamps, and a paper trail that proved the transfer happened before the divorce was filed. It was legal. It was mine. But Derek had one more card to play. A card I hadn't anticipated. A card that would force me to reveal something I'd hoped to keep secret. So, what was Derek's final move? And what secret was I hiding? Let me know your theories in the comments. Part 2 is about the offshore account, the hidden truth, and the moment everything changes.
Subscribe.
Derek's lawyers filed an emergency motion to freeze my separate account within 48 hours of the deposition. They argued that the transfer was fraudulent concealment of marital assets and demanded that the funds be returned to the joint account pending the divorce settlement. The judge, a woman named Morrison, scheduled a hearing for the following week. I spent that week preparing, gathering documents, and making one very important phone call to my banker in the Cayman Islands. Because the $780,000 Derek thought I'd moved to a domestic account? That was just the decoy. The real money was somewhere he'd never find it. Let me explain. When I first discovered Derek's financial maneuvering, I didn't just hire a forensic accountant. I also consulted with an international financial advisor, a woman named Priya who specialized in asset protection for high-net-worth individuals facing divorce. She explained the risks. If Derek knew about any account in my name, he could freeze it, contest it, tie it up in court for years. The only way to truly protect my assets was to move them somewhere he couldn't reach. Offshore accounts aren't just for tax evasion, Priya said. They're for protection. If you structure it properly, with the right legal framework, your money can be safe from any judgment in a U.S. court. But you have to do it before the divorce is filed. After that, it's too late. So I did it. 3 months before I filed for divorce, I opened an account in the Cayman Islands under the name of a trust I'd created. The trust was structured so that I was the sole beneficiary, but the legal ownership was held by a Cayman-based company. Derek couldn't touch it. His lawyers couldn't find it. And the U.S. court had no jurisdiction over it. The $780,000 I'd moved to the domestic account was a decoy, a carefully calculated amount that would satisfy Derek's greed and keep him from looking deeper. It was enough to fight over, enough to occupy his lawyers, enough to make them think they'd won something when they eventually got it frozen. But the real money, over $1.2 million in retirement funds I'd earned over 2 decades, was safely tucked away in the Caymans. The hearing was a circus. Derek's lawyer, Harrison, argued passionately that I'd stolen marital assets and should be held in contempt. I sat calmly, my hands folded, as Priya, my divorce lawyer, not to be confused with the international advisor, presented our case. Your Honor, Priya said, the transfer in question occurred 3 weeks before my client filed for divorce. At that time, she was legally entitled to manage her own retirement assets. The funds in question represent her individual contributions to the 401k over 20 years of employment. They are not marital assets, they are her separate property, commingled only by convenience. Harrison sputtered. She emptied the account. There's nothing left for my client. The account still contains funds. The funds my client transferred were hers alone. If your client wishes to claim a portion of the remaining funds, he is free to do so. But he cannot claim what was never his. Judge Morrison listened carefully, then ruled. The domestic account would be frozen pending the divorce, but the transfer itself was not illegal. Derek could fight for his share of what remained, but he couldn't touch what I'd already moved. Derek's face was a mask of fury. He planned to empty our joint accounts, hide his own assets, and leave me with nothing. Instead, I'd outmaneuvered him at every turn. After the hearing, Derek cornered me in the hallway. His eyes were wild, his voice low and threatening. "You think you've won? You think this is over? I'll find where you hid that money. I'll hire forensic accountants, private investigators, whoever it takes. And when I do, I'll take every penny." I looked at him calmly. "You can try, Derek. But the money is in a jurisdiction that doesn't recognize U.S. divorce judgments. It's protected by laws you don't understand. And even if you found it, you'd never get to it." His face went pale. "You moved it offshore?" I smiled. "I moved it somewhere you'll never find it. Somewhere your lawyers can't touch it. Somewhere safe." I walked away, leaving him standing in the hallway, his world crumbling around him. But Derek wasn't done. He had one more card to play, one that would force me to reveal the truth, or lose everything. So, what was Derek's final move? And how far was he willing to go to destroy me? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Part 3 is about the fight for the truth, and the lies that finally surface.
Subscribe.
Derek hired a forensic accountant within a week of the hearing. A man named Richard who specialized in tracking hidden assets, offshore accounts, and financial fraud. Richard was good, I'll give him that. He subpoenaed my bank records, my credit card statements, my travel history. He interviewed friends, colleagues, anyone who might know where I'd been or what I'd done. For months, I felt like I was being watched, followed, investigated. But Richard was looking for the wrong thing. He was looking for a transaction, a wire transfer, a paper trail. What he didn't know was that the money had never moved. Let me explain the structure. The offshore account wasn't funded by a wire transfer from my domestic accounts. That would have left a trail, a big, obvious trail that Richard would have found immediately. Instead, I'd used a different method. Years ago, when I first started suspecting Derek's financial maneuvering, I'd begun diverting a portion of my paycheck into a separate investment account. Small amounts, $500 here, $1,000 there, nothing that would raise suspicion. Over 5 years, those small deposits added up to over $200,000. I'd then used that money to purchase assets, art, collectibles, precious metals that I stored in a safe deposit box under a false name. Those assets were then sold overseas, and the proceeds deposited directly into the Cayman account. No wire transfers, no paper trail. No connection to me. The $780,000 I'd moved from the joint 401k was a separate transaction, one I'd deliberately made traceable. It was the bait, the decoy, the thing I wanted Richard to find. And find it he did. "Mrs. Vance," Richard said during his deposition, his voice dripping with self-satisfaction, "can you explain the transfer of $780,000 from your joint 401k to an account in your name only?"
Yes.
"I moved my retirement funds to protect them during the divorce." "And where are those funds now?" "They're in a domestic account, frozen by court order, as you well know." Richard smiled. "I'm not asking about the frozen account. I'm asking about the rest. The money you moved before that. The money that doesn't appear on any of your domestic statements." I kept my face neutral. "I don't know what you're talking about." "I think you do. I think you've been hiding assets for years. Small amounts, over time, adding up to something significant. I think that money is somewhere offshore, and I intend to find it. You can try." The deposition ended, but the investigation intensified. Richard hired private investigators to follow me, to track my movements, to interview anyone who might know something. They talked to my friends, my colleagues, even my hairdresser. They dug through my trash, monitored my phone, tried to crack my email. It was invasive, exhausting, and ultimately fruitless. Because the key to the offshore account wasn't in my phone or my computer or my trash. It was in my head. A series of numbers, passwords, and codes that I'd memorized and would never write down. Months passed. The divorce dragged on. Derek grew increasingly desperate, convinced that I'd hidden a fortune he couldn't reach. His lawyers filed motion after motion, demanding more discovery, more hearings, more delays. But without proof, without a paper trail, they had nothing. Then one day, I got a call from my banker in the Caymans. Mrs. Vance, we've noticed some unusual activity. Someone has been trying to access your account. Multiple failed login attempts, inquiries from a law firm in the United States. We've blocked all access and flagged the account for security. Is everything all right? I felt a chill run down my spine. Derek had found the account. Somehow, despite my precautions, he'd found it. I called Priya immediately. They found the offshore account. Someone's been trying to access it. Priya was quiet for a moment.
How?
How could they find it? I don't know. But my banker says there have been multiple attempts. Inquiries from a law firm. They've blocked access, but if Derek gets a court order, he might be able to force disclosure. We need to act fast. If he can prove the account exists and that you funded it with marital assets, he could claim a share. We need to get ahead of this. I spent the next week in crisis mode, consulting with my international advisor, reviewing every document, preparing for the worst. But Derek's lawyers were already moving. They filed an emergency motion, claiming they had evidence of hidden assets and demanding that I be compelled to disclose the account. The hearing was scheduled for the following week. And this time, I wasn't sure I could win. So, what happens at the hearing? Does Derek finally get his proof? And what will I do if the court orders me to disclose the account? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Part 4 is the showdown, and the truth that finally comes out.
Subscribe.
The courtroom was packed. Derek sat at the plaintiff's table with his lawyers, looking smug and confident. His forensic accountant, Richard, sat behind them, a thick binder of evidence in front of him. I sat with Priya, my hands clasped in my lap, my face calm despite the storm inside. Judge Morrison called the court to order and looked at Derek's lawyer. Mr. Harrison, you've filed an emergency motion alleging that the respondent has hidden assets offshore. The court will hear your evidence. Harrison stood, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Thank you, Your Honor. We have reason to believe that Mrs. Vance has concealed over $1 million in a Cayman Islands account. Harrison called Richard to the stand. The forensic accountant walked confidently to the witness box, his binder of evidence held like a trophy. Mr. Richard, can you summarize your findings for the court? Richard nodded. Over the past 6 months, I've conducted an extensive investigation into Mrs. Vance's financial activities. I've reviewed bank statements, credit card records, travel histories, and interviewed numerous individuals. What I found is a pattern of concealment consistent with offshore asset hiding. Can you be more specific?
Yes.
Mrs. Vance made numerous small cash withdrawals over several years, amounts just under the reporting threshold. She purchased assets that could be easily liquidated and moved. And most importantly, we've identified communications with a financial institution in the Cayman Islands. Judge Morrison raised an eyebrow. You have proof of these communications? We have records of encrypted emails, IP addresses traced to the Cayman Islands, and multiple failed login attempts to a secure banking portal. We believe Mrs. Vance has an account there containing approximately $1.2 million. The courtroom murmured. Derek's smile widened. Priya stood. Your Honor, this is speculation, not evidence. My client has the right to financial privacy, and Mr. Richard's investigation has produced nothing but conjecture. Judge Morrison looked at me. Mrs. Vance, do you have anything to say? I stood slowly. Your Honor, I do. I walked to the witness stand, my heart pounding but my voice steady. I'd prepared for this moment. I knew exactly what I had to say. Your Honor, I don't deny that I have assets. I've worked for 20 years, contributed to my retirement, saved diligently. What I deny is that I've hidden anything illegally. Harrison jumped up. Your Honor, she's admitting. Let her speak, Mr. Harrison. I continued. The funds Mr. Richard claims to have found are mine. They represent my individual contributions to my retirement over 2 decades. They are not marital assets. They are my separate property, earned before and during my marriage, never commingled with joint funds. Then why hide them offshore? Harrison demanded. I didn't hide them. I protected them. I knew my husband was siphoning money from our joint accounts. I knew he was planning to leave me with nothing. So I took steps to protect what was mine legally, ethically, and within my rights. Judge Morrison looked at me sharply. Mrs. Vance, are you saying you moved funds offshore specifically to keep them from your husband? I'm saying I moved funds to keep them safe. The offshore account was established before I filed for divorce. It is structured as a trust, with me as the sole beneficiary. Under the laws of the Cayman Islands and the relevant U.S. statutes, it is beyond the reach of this court. Harrison was on his feet again. Your Honor, this is outrageous. She's admitting to hiding assets. Judge Morrison held up a hand. Mr. Harrison, sit down. Mrs. Vance, you understand that if these funds were marital assets, if they were earned during the marriage and commingled, your husband may have a claim to them. I understand, Your Honor. But they weren't. Every dollar in that account can be traced directly to my individual earnings, deposited into accounts in my name only, never touched by my husband. I have documentation, pay stubs, tax returns, account statements, proving that these funds were always separate. I pulled a folder from my bag and handed it to the bailiff. This contains 20 years of financial records. Every dollar I earned, every tax return I filed, every account I held in my name only. The court can review it all. Judge Morrison took the folder and began flipping through it. The room was silent. After what felt like an eternity, she looked up. This is thorough. Mrs. Vance has provided documentation tracing her individual contributions over 2 decades. The funds in question appear to be her separate property. Harrison sputtered. Your Honor, we need time to review these documents. You'll have time, Mr. Harrison. But based on what I've seen, Mrs. Vance has made a compelling case that these assets are hers alone. The motion to compel disclosure is denied. The court will appoint a special master to review the documentation and issue a report within 60 days. Derek's face went white. He looked at me, fury and disbelief warring in his eyes. The hearing ended. Derek stormed out, his lawyers trailing behind. I sat in the courtroom, exhausted but triumphant. For now, I'd won. But Derek wasn't done. A week later, I got a call from my banker in the Caymans. Mrs. Vance, we've received a legal inquiry from a U.S. law firm. They're asking about your account. They're threatening to pursue international legal action. I felt my stomach drop. Derek was taking this global. He was willing to spend whatever it took, go wherever he needed, to get to my money. I called Priya. They're going after the Cayman account. Internationally. Priya was quiet for a moment. This is going to get expensive. And messy. But they have no jurisdiction there. It's a bluff. It doesn't feel like a bluff. It feels like he'll never stop. He won't. Not until you make him. So what do I do next? How do I make Derek stop? And what happens when the special master's report comes out? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. The final part is about the endgame and the price of freedom.
Subscribe.
The special master's report took 3 months. 3 months of waiting, wondering, and watching Derek's lawyers file motion after motion, trying to delay, distract, and derail. But when the report finally came, it was everything I'd hoped for. The special master, a retired judge named Harrison, no relation to Derek's lawyer, had reviewed every document, every pay stub, every tax return. His conclusion: the offshore funds were my separate property, traceable to my individual earnings, and not subject to division in the divorce. Derek had lost. Completely, utterly, and permanently. The divorce trial was scheduled for 6 weeks after the special master's report. By then, Derek's resources were depleted. He'd spent hundreds of thousands on lawyers, forensic accountants, and private investigators, all for nothing. His own finances were in shambles. The money he'd siphoned from our joint accounts had been spent on legal fees, and the assets he'd hidden were now exposed. The trial itself was anticlimactic. Derek's lawyers put on a weak defense, arguing that I'd somehow schemed against him, that the offshore account was proof of my bad faith. But the evidence was clear. I'd acted legally, ethically, and within my rights. The judge ruled in my favor on every major issue. The settlement gave me the house, the retirement accounts, including the offshore funds, and full custody of our children. Derek got his car, his personal belongings, and a monthly payment of child support that he'd struggled to make. He left the courtroom a defeated man, his dreams of financial victory shattered. But the story doesn't end there. A month after the trial, I got a call from Derek's brother, Mark. We'd never been close, but his voice on the phone was urgent. "Claire, I need to tell you something. Derek's been arrested." I felt a chill run down my spine. Arrested? For what? Tax evasion. The IRS audited him after the divorce. They found years of unreported income, hidden accounts, fraudulent deductions. He's facing federal charges. I sat down heavily. Derek, the man who tried to destroy me, was now facing prison. And I felt nothing. Not satisfaction. Not relief. Not pity. Just a quiet acknowledgement that actions have consequences, and his had finally caught up with him. The trial was public. Derek's fraud was exposed in excruciating detail, the accounts he'd hidden, the taxes he'd evaded, the lies he'd told. He was convicted on multiple counts and sentenced to 4 years in federal prison. Our children, teenagers now, struggled with the shame and confusion of having a father behind bars. I did my best to support them, to help them understand that his choices were his own, not theirs. The offshore account remained mine. Untouched.
Secure.
I used some of the money to start a scholarship for women going through divorce, a way to help others protect themselves the way I'd learned to protect myself. The rest I kept for retirement, for my children's education, for the future I'd fought so hard to secure. The micro-niche here isn't just divorce finance or offshore accounts. It's about the importance of financial literacy, especially for women who've been taught to leave money matters to their husbands. It's about the power of planning, of paying attention, of trusting your instincts when something feels wrong. It's about understanding that love and money are different things, and that protecting yourself isn't betrayal, it's survival. Have you ever been financially blindsided in a relationship? Did you have the tools to protect yourself? Or did you have to learn the hard way? Share your stories in the comments below. Let's build a community of women and men who understand that financial independence isn't just about money, it's about freedom, dignity, and peace of mind. And if this story of hidden accounts, legal battles, and hard-won justice resonated with you, share it. Every share is a reminder that knowledge is power and that the best revenge is a secure future. Thanks for listening.